afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to another Airport Show Insights webinar. My name is Daniel Qureshi, and I'm a Group Exhibition Director at REIT Exhibitions Middle East, organizers of the Airport Show. Thank you all for joining us today, and I hope you find today's discussion on how remote working will shape the future of air traffic management exciting and informative. We're pleased to be joined today by four leading experts, two from Dubai Air Navigation Services, DANS, who have the incredible task of managing the world's busiest international airport, and one each from world leaders in digital towers, Searage, and the Polish Air Navigation Services agency, PANZA, who manage one of the largest airspaces in Europe. Aviation, as you know, has experienced the worst ever decline in its history due to COVID-19. In April 2020, global passenger demand was 94% below the same period last year. And as we gradually move further away from these dark days, we're now operating globally at almost 50% of 2019 capacity. As domestic air travel recovers quickly and regional and international air travel is restored in phases, ANSPs have put in place robust measures to protect the health and safety of their employees and continue supporting the recovery of aviation. Our panelists today will discuss how air traffic management was already an early adopter of today's Khurram Qureshi, a CNS ATM project manager at DANS and a past moderator at the Global Airport Leaders Forum. Khurram started his aviation career in 2001 at Boeing in the USA, followed by roles at NASA and FAA before finally moving to the UAE in 2012. He's a true industry expert, and I'm sure you will enjoy listening to him and our other speakers as much as we enjoyed preparing for this session. Before I pass on the mic, a kind reminder, please, to post your questions in the Q&A window so Khurram can try to get to as many of these during the webinar as possible. May I also request all the other speakers to kindly mute their mics. Thank you, and over to you, Khurram.
Thank you, Daniel. Good afternoon from sunny Dubai, and a warm welcome to all distinguished guests and attendees from around the world who have taken their valuable time to participate in this discussion. And my sincere prayers and the good wishes for you and your family's safety during these difficult times. I would like to thank REIT Exhibitions for organizing this webinar for us to learn from the valuable experiences of the industry leaders and our attendees. Our discussion will be focused around the opportunities that are being explored due to the current pandemic situation, where the ANSPs are looking into innovative ways of utilizing the ATC workforce in the future by combining remote technologies, utilizing big data, and conducting remote ATC operations. Daniel, if you could please put the slide up on there, if you don't mind. Yeah, while Daniel is just putting that up. So just to relate to our today's topic, I would like to quote a few statements from a recommendation made by ICAO to the states and ANSPs on the COVID-19 outbreak that provide us with the opportunities along with the challenges that will be discussed today. So in preparation for the recovery phase, adequate time for the gradual return of traffic should be anticipated, taken into consideration ATC's capability to handle, again, an increased amount of traffic after the recess period. This includes the measures taken to ensure continued competency, qualifications, and skills of the air traffic controllers. And also the availability of adequate number of ATC staff that is ready to handle the expected increase of traffic within the en route and terminal airspaces, considering the preventive measures that might be in place. Now, coming to the topic itself, until now, the remote tower solutions had been an option for very small airports with low levels of traffic only. However, the advancements in technologies, there are opportunities to control a large international airport around the clock from one external location. In addition to that, many ANSPs are working towards the plan to have the air traffic controllers progressively acquire all of the ratings needed to control air traffic for multiple airports from one location. Of course, there exists staffing challenges and travel restrictions as a hurdle towards this. So with that, I would like to introduce our speakers for this webinar, who are, of course, industry leaders from ANSPs, technologies, and ATC industry. So without any further ado, as Daniel put up the initial slide that you may have seen in the beginning, our first speaker is Mr. Talal Al-Hamadi. He's the Vice President of Air Traffic Development at Dubai Navigation Services. He's an ex-air traffic controller with over 19 years of experience with UAE's General Civil Aviation Authority, and also he's been with Dubai Air Navigation Services for many years now in senior roles. Second, Mr. Neil Bowles. He's the Vice President of Sea-Ridge Technologies. He's also an ex-air traffic controller with over 23 years of ATC and ATM experience. Prior to Sea-Ridge, he was with UK NATS and also worked with DANS prior to joining Sea-Ridge. And he's been there for almost 5 years now. Our third SME is Mr. Jarosław Nowinski, also known as Jarek. He is the head of innovations at Polish Air Navigation Services Agency, also an ex-ATC with Panza for 19 years, serving in different senior roles. So with that, I would like to come to our SMEs to provide the views on today's topic. So Neil, if you could please provide us some insight into what and how Sea-Ridge is supporting the infrastructure for the remote operations and how it connects to our topic.
Okay, thank you very much, Karam. Thank you for that introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today for this webinar. So a little bit about Sea-Ridge before I get into the main topic. So we're headquartered in Ottawa, Canada. We have a number of offices around the world as well, where some of our senior management are residing. We're seen as a leader, and we see ourselves as a leader in digital tower and digital apron solutions. So our customer base is split between ANSPs and airports. And that's a very important consideration, considering the impact that COVID has had on that part of the industry. We're owned by 2 ANSPs in NAV Canada and NATS. So we've really seen, obviously, we've had a unique perspective on how ANSPs are responding to COVID crisis. The whole industry, including ANSPs, including airports, airlines, OEMs, and other suppliers, have all seen an immediate decline in revenue that was unprecedented. As Daniel said, April we were down to around maybe less than 10% of normal traffic figures, and all the stakeholders involved were faced with a similar issue: is the infrastructure in place to support remote functions of your role? And that has a particular relevance for ANSPs. How do you remote a number of functions but maintain operational services? So we're going to talk a little bit about the data capabilities that are around to support such activities. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about digital tower. Big airports have big data. There's no way around this. Medium and large airports have multiple ATM data sources required to provide a safe and efficient service. We're talking systems such as electronic flight progress strips, surveillance systems, airfield lighting, nav aids. All of those systems are providing data, sharing data, providing that to air traffic controllers and also to other personnel. Now, to digitize all of that requires a substantial network with considerable bandwidth and obviously the corresponding cybersecurity. So one of the challenges is how do you provide that data in a timely manner to air traffic controllers when they need it and where they need it. Now, within the airport landscape, if you like, the infrastructure is there at a large airport, but how do we remote large remote towers to remote facilities and remote sites? So we'll talk a little bit about that hopefully today in the discussion as well. I really want to talk about a couple of examples of large digital towers that are sharing and utilizing lots of big data. So what you can see in front of you is our smart tower prototype system that's currently installed in Singapore Airport, Changi Airport, in operation with CAS. So we've had support in that installation as well with NATS and Hungaro control as well. So it's a large system. We've got a large team collaborating. And just looking at this, you can see there's a lot of data. There's a lot of video data. We have over 100 cameras installed at the airport across multiple installation sites. There's other systems in use that information has to be available to the controllers. And we're also integrating data such as ASM GCS, surface surveillance data that's being provided to the controllers in the form of flight data labels. And you can see some of those on the screen. And those data labels track the aircraft and make that information available to controllers when they need it, where they need it. The one more opportunity or example that I want to speak about of a really, really innovative use of the technology during the COVID crisis has been with Hungaro Control and the Budapest Remote Tower. So the Budapest Remote Tower was first certified for live use in 2016. And Hungaro Control have been using it ever since as a contingency facility, but also cycling their controllers through that system to maintain currency on the system. And this has really, really come to the fore as part of Hungaro Control's response to COVID. So they were faced, just as every other ANSP is faced with, how do we maintain an operational service and keep our air traffic controllers and air traffic engineers safe and free of infection to provide that service? So what Hungaro Control did was actually brought the remote tower into daily use. They split their operational teams into teams A and team B. The day shift teams operated from the remote tower, and the night shift teams operated from the conventional tower. And by doing that, they were able to keep teams separate from each other, reduce the chance of any cross-infection, and still maintain the resilience to provide the service. And during this period, they've accrued over 2,000 hours of operational experience and controlled safely around about 30,000 aircraft movements at a reduced rate of down to 10 to 15 movements per hour. So this has been a real response from an NSP of how we're going to manage this crisis. Now, you know, as we get through the questions, hopefully we'll be able to discuss a little bit more about the data and the infrastructure to support remote working. But the infrastructure is here already to support remote ATC functions. With that, I'd like to hand back to Karam. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. That was a very thoughtful and good insight into the infrastructure aspects which exist from CRID's side, and great work with Hungaro Control. So thank you. I would just like to remind our audience that if you have any questions, please share with me in the Q&A window. And also, there will be a survey which will be generated. So I would request all of you to please provide feedback to us. That would be very valuable to read and to ourselves to continuously improve these webinars. So with that, I would like to come to Mr. Talal. If you could please provide us some insight into the ATC aspect. When the remote infrastructure is available, how the ATC and as an ANSP, you guys are looking at working remotely. Is this idea something realistic? Is this an idea that we are seeing in the future, which is actually going to grow? And what sort of challenges do exist around it, not only from infrastructure, but be it tools or be it the regulatory challenges that you see from ATC side?
Before I go to my presentation and to answer your question, is this possible? I can say that the easiest possible answer is, I don't know, is it possible or no? And it is fine that we say we don't know, because whenever we say we don't know, that opens up our minds and that take us to innovative thinking and innovative ways. It's all starting with I don't know. Then ideas will be generated in your mind. What I'm about to share with you is a small presentation that I did. So I just have a brief of what happened today, as Daniel shared with everybody, the reduction of the air traffic movement around the globe is happening. In order to get out of all of this old mentality, we need to rethink everything. We need to use we need to analyze the data. We need to think of strategies for future, and how to think of strategies of future is with data. The data is in front of us. History will teach us, and history has had taught us before. What I want to focus in this presentation is that a lot of organizations, and we in dance also, we struggle with ATCOs. I know this might be a taboo kind of subject, but I mean, we are struggling with recruiting ATCOs. We were everybody in the world, they are saying the demand for ATCOs are high, the demand are high, and there is a big gap with the air traffic controllers. This situation forced us to stop, rethink, and reboot, and rethink of innovative ways. These are a couple of questions that I had in my mind, and after this slide, I will show you a diagram. The diagram is basically how I envisage the future of aviation, at least from 20 to 30 years. We are talking about what is the relation between 5G and the aviation industry, and how it can be used. The ATM and UTM systems, the relationship with the ATCOs, what is the AI role here? We all know that everybody is talking about AI. What role will AI play? The remote working. What I mean remote working is basically somebody out of UAE, a controller out of UAE, working for the UAE remotely. I'm not talking only about tower, I'm talking about tower, approach, you name it. Then there is the big question, obviously, how the security issues will be addressed and how the regulations will be addressed. For us internally as ANSPs, how we will choose, how we will train ATCOs, and what we are doing currently to explore this area. I will go to the other slide, and hopefully I will not take long. This is just my thinking on how the concept will be. This is just a high-level concept. More details I can provide in a later stage if somebody interested. So as you can see in the middle column, we have our infrastructure, which is the global SWIM, or as you want, you call it as you want, SWIM. Then there is the infrastructures. The infrastructure, which I mean is the ATM and UTM, the systems itself. You have the statistics and analysis team that will analyze all of this data. You have the big data repository, and you have the blockchain. Big data repository, you need the big data repository in order to generate all this information and to store all this information. Blockchain is there purely to manage your money transaction, in my mind. Around this shape, there will be the safety, obviously, the regulations, and we need to lift up the regulations, the security aspect, the training aspect, and the agreements. The agreements here, I mean the agreements between countries, because this concept is somebody from a controller from Bahrain log in into UAE ATM systems and work on the ATM system for 1 hour or 2 hours, and the system will log his work for 1 hour and 2 hours, and then will be stored in the big data repository, and through blockchain you will pay the controller by hour. I know this might be a long way, a big shot. AI, when we talk about the artificial intelligence, as we know, there are two types of artificial intelligence. There is the narrow type of artificial intelligence, and there is the general type of artificial intelligence. All of this will feed into the general type of artificial intelligence, meaning that the machine will get more and more exposure and more data, and you will introduce machine learning in order for the second phase to kick. I don't want to talk about the second phase because people are scared about AI, obviously, from losing their jobs, but I have my different views. And by this, I would like to end my presentation.
No, thank you, Talal, for such great insight. You're absolutely right. I think the challenges are there, and obviously, it may not be a taboo topic. Obviously, there are people talking about remote working, and especially in these pandemic situations. All of the ANSPs and ATC have realized that they need to move on to digital remote type of operations. But of course, the challenges are there. The challenges need to be addressed. And I believe that if we don't talk about these challenges, then we will never be able to actually get to that point. Yes, we may be away from making this a reality in the long run, but the reality is that the remote tower operations at least do exist. Can this be remotely outside the country? That is something that we'll come back to our panelists to get their views later on. Now, the infrastructure part and also the ATC view with the data, something that Neil also alluded to, and Talal, you mentioned in your presentation about 5G, etc. Obviously, there's big data available along with all this scenario. Jarek, would you please be able to provide us some insight into how this big data will be available, what sort of opportunity and challenges exist from the big data standpoint? I would appreciate your views on that, please. Thank you. Over to you.
Very much for this opportunity. Thank you very much for joining us here today, and of course for my fellow panelists to discuss on some important things. First of all, let me bring quickly the information about PANSA. As you mentioned already, we have the 6th airspace in terms of size in Europe, with over 872,000 IFR movement just in 2018. We are 9th largest country and 6th largest in the EU, meaning that we have certain problems to face, connecting 15 aerodromes together in one ACC for the 4 different approach sectors and 15 towers. Of course, as you mentioned already, our major part and most critical response to COVID is to use the data better. The concept that we started way before COVID now became really important, and it's shaping us for the future. From the fragmented system, because we already touched this a little bit, we get into the data integration. We started this path already into more object-based service. So we are less dependent on the individual systems, but more capable to show different objects, different traffic types on one screen in the future. Of course, it's still the future that will allow us to be used widely, maybe when the cybersecurity allows so, with use of artificial intelligence and machine learning to deliver the position in the long run to the controller at homes, which will actually allow to respond to COVID crisis even better, especially considering the situation with very limited resources that Talal touched already. So the people that are in the loop that we have really limited number of, and the staff that really needs a very good training. Nevertheless, it's all connected with growing efficiency, and our idea that is really based on data fits the modern environment. It connects the research ideas, it connects the future path, and of course, I fully agree with what Tala said about the I don't know. We really didn't know before the COVID started how we can use the data, how we can make them work for us even better. The data that are working for us are basically the data that are widely available. On top of the most important ones, that one connected with the airport traffic, flight traffic, drone traffic, weather, we also collect the data with the mimics, with the behavior of the different object types, so we can simply predict something a little bit better. What we can achieve so far, what we could achieve so far is actually in the live and controlled data sharing environment, improved our ATM services. Through connectivity and scalability, through expanded integration, we already started working in a little bit different way on the tower level, and in the long run, it will allow us to prepare ourselves to the environment that is also capable to manage the flow of the traffic better. For us, the optimized flow management is very important because we are the borderline country, the borderline of the EU country, which means that we also have some kinds of the traffic that is also coming from time to time from countries from Middle East. But this traffic is truly unpredictable. It is unpredictable for us, although the message is shared. So we try to really employ the data to work them for us better. The data actually are being treated as the new gold. I would really try to sell it in the long run as something that will help manage our resources better. And of course, offer our services in the more tailored and integrated way to both airports and airlines. But the most important part, and I believe the most interesting, is how we improved our services through integration of unmanned, so the UAV, growing UAV market services. The live and control data sharing, the only operationally working in Europe UTM system that PANSA actually co-developed and introduced this year, allowed us to bring the services that are beyond current known methods of serving the UTM services, the unmanned services, to different groups, and of course allowed integration and coordination in the way that we could actually address the new services available for public sector very easily. We'll expand it further. In the few months from now, we'll start another project that already has been signed, that will actually allow us to produce more public services and introduce the market integration in the new, completely new and very modern way, so we could serve this kind of traffic better. The data allowed us to keep aviation very responsive and less dependent on the situation that was created with this completely unknown to us COVID situation. We faced in the previous years different breaks in the traffic. We faced the volcano situation back in 2010. However, this situation happened to us for the very first time. So we thought that basically the concept that we created over 2 years ago to bring the data working for us actually became very, very important, and it will allow us to transit from the current man-dependent traffic to the less man-dependent traffic, but still in a way that will use our resources in the best possible way. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share the vision, and I hope we'll get some questions.
Thank you, Jarek, for excellent insights. Now, I would request the audience, please, if you could share more questions. So I have been receiving some questions, and we will come to those, and we will get our speakers answer some of those. If there are some similar ones, we will just combine them. Also, please do not forget to provide us some feedback through the survey link, which is being shared by Reed in the window here. So just touching upon something that I think Jarek Neil and also Talal has mentioned, so there is, of course, the idea of remote working and remote operations is happening. It's a reality, but there is a big talk about the bandwidth issue and how the infrastructure in terms of the big data sharing is going to be handled. So if it's within the airport environment or in, limited environment, that can be managed. But when you are discussing on a global level or on a much larger scale, of course, the need for big data bandwidth becomes a big topic. So I would like to come to Neil, and I would like to get the view from the other speakers as well. Neil, from the supplier vendor perspective, how do you think it is being addressed, or how it will need to be addressed in the future? And if you can touch upon some challenges, that would be great, please.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Karam. Broadly, as an OEM, we sometimes face the challenge of access to data in the first instance. So sometimes data can be made available, but it's in proprietary formats, which can be an issue. And we at Sea Ridge, we'd like to recommend, or our vision is really for open networks, open source software, use of APIs so that people can share data in more effective ways. I think a greater acceptance or greater uptake of SWIM would be good. I remember speaking on a panel about 2 years ago at World ATM in Madrid, and I haven't seen too much progress even in those couple of years. But I think a big enabler would be a move towards cloud data storage. At the moment, there's a feeling that this data, it's very proprietary. It needs to be safe and secure. We need to store our data on site. But really, to enable the sort of data, data sharing that we're going to need as we go forward, I think a move to cloud-based services would be really, really helpful. And some airports are taking that step, and some NSPs are as well. I think we'd like to see a greater uptake of that.
Thank you, Neil. Talal, I think you mentioned something along the lines of course, SWIM as well as 5G. Now, SWIM is part of the ICAO's ASBU journey that is being addressed, and of course, that has a high bandwidth requirement. So if we move into the remote operations, it's going to take into the same direction. So what are your views in terms of this data availability, and do you have thoughts how it needs to be addressed from the ANSP perspective? Any thoughts on that?
Okay, if I understand your question, well, if you want to talk about SWIM, ICAO had this idea of the SWIM, and then they also talked about the global SWIM network. It is a long shot. We know that, and I echo Neil's statements about the data, the security of the data, how we deal with data. Also, I agree with him that we need to move it's like we need to stop thinking of that this data is only for us. There are these data this data can be used by other ANSP. We need to share in order to break all of this. I mean, if we kept saying we need secure data, we need secure data. Yes, you need security. We know. Well, you need security. You need regulations. You need laws. But sometimes you need to bend those laws or the security. I don't mean break the security. I mean bend them a little bit, because you need to share all of this data. What is the other part of your question?
I think I want to, Talal, just want to hear from you from the, you mentioned about the usage of 5G. So certainly I think bandwidth aspect of that, probably I would say is if we get to YARIC on that, because your expertise obviously are on the ATC domain, and I think from the data side, maybe Yorick may be able to provide some insight, some challenges and how it needs to be addressed in the future, because that is going to be the foundation from the technology standpoint. So thank you, Talal. Let's move to Yorick for a second. Yorick, please.
We actually face a couple of problems here. First of all, and I would say the bandwidth is the least important among those. If we are talking about data as a whole, of course, it doesn't apply to the video data, which is I would say a problem. However, if we just consider the data perspective, there are still a majority that is very low in terms of requirements. So this is not a problem. We also have this false positive understanding that segregation of these systems actually brings us safety. So the cybersecurity or the data sources must be guaranteed. So I share the view of Talal that blockchain might be one of the sources of putting the I would say signature, the truth to the source of the data and the data themselves. And this is something that we are touching in our different work, that we have aggregated plenty of data into data lakes. We know how to serve them to the outside and inside world through the different APIs or interfaces. However, the security, both in terms of the origin, but also on the processed data, is something that we are actually addressing through the different projects at this stage. And of course, we were considering blockchain as one of the sources of the truth. However, we also believe that any other kind of security that goes with the identification of the data, unanimous identifier, confirmation through different sources of the same data, will actually bring it to the level that may be useful for the aviation. In the aviation, a quite important part is also the synchronization. By the synchronization, of course, I mean the cooperation between the ground systems and air systems. That is also very important because plenty of data are generated from the air, and we need to make sure that those data that are generated are actually fitting in the ground system. So this is something that will be very touchy subject in the long run. But of course, so within the current systems and the growth of the bandwidth, 5G is among of those, but also the satellite ADSB, satellite communication, became very important to the industry. I believe that we can do something better with the data.
Thank you, Yorick. That was helpful. I just want to touch upon coming to the ATC side of that. So Talal, more to yourself, and we'll go to the other speakers. So obviously, remote operations and the talking about the vision and the future will have extensive impact on the training requirements, and training needs to be changed. The concept of how we are operating air traffic control today is going to evolve. How will that be addressed? Will the regulator be open to that change? So, and will the global ANSPs come to table to say, okay, well, there can be a joint way moving forward when it comes to coming up with certain standard training requirements along the globe? How do you see that from Dan's and UAE's perspective?
Training, if we are talking about training, you will not have a single country have the same regulations and rules for training. You will always have the difference between the countries. In order to unify them, that is something else. But for regulators, I don't think the time has not come for the regulators. I'm being honest now. The time has not come for the regulators to accept this change. I think they are still focusing on the physical training, where a trainee have to be over there or in the area. It's not like online training, online OJTI. We and DANS are exploring how to recruit ATCOs from abroad. We have something we are calling it APCs, which we choose candidates from outside the UAE. We are exploring how to do it remotely. how to recruit ACOs remotely, to test them remotely. That will save a lot of cost on us. Instead of bringing an ACO here and paying for the hotel and going through the whole process, it will give us, as I say, a fighting chance, with the regulators. If we can prove this can happen, then we might go for the full online training for the ATCOs. But each country is different. So I'm talking only about UAE now. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Neil, I would like to just come to you. So do you think that the infrastructure that Seerage has put in is going to support remote training and people being able to access that infrastructure and be able to get the training and license, maybe not even license, but at least initial training before they're hired? Is that possible? And what's your thoughts on remote training itself?
Thanks, Karam. Yeah, I think remote training is possible, and it's starting to happen now. You know, so I think we've seen some simulation providers offering a kind of a really interesting pricing model, freemium, if you like, where they're making you know, training available to ANSPs for a period of time, you know, with the assumption then that some of them uptake that on a subscription basis. So already we're seeing the opportunity to move, you know, from a significant capital expenditure to maybe a more of an OpEx type pricing model. Now within the technology, yeah, the capability exists to be able to train people remotely. Now, when it comes to operating a remote or digital tower, you know, from say more of a home basis, that's a completely different question. But I think the technology exists now that you could operate cross-border live services for sure, and that really becomes more of a political question than a technological one.
Thank you, Neil. Yarek, just again, so Panza, of course, has been involved from data side, and you guys are ANSP as well. Have you guys seen any remote training in Europe? And if so, how is your customers or partners seeing this as remote training being implemented within their respective ANSPs?
First of all, I must agree, of course, with Talal that everything depends on the country or the union. In the European Union, we are facing, I would say, problems or unusual situation, considering that we have a regulation, common regulation, setting the requirements for the training. It didn't help us much at the very beginning to have this regulation, although it standardizes a lot of things. It also prevents us to be very responsive. So plenty of measures needed to be adopted in order to face the situation. So basically, we needed to extend the controller's license. We needed to change the approach to the maintenance of the license that are very crucial. And also we needed to switch part of the training that we were capable to switch easily to the remote training to the remote one. But still the major problem comes when we talk about the current license holders, because those license holders are actually required to maintain the, on one side, contact with the traffic, which disappeared suddenly. On the other hand, to maintain their competences through constant acquisition of the changes to the airspace, requirements, changes to the law. So basically this became a problem. And of course, simulators will help us a lot, but it will not fulfill all the training requirements for a very simple reason. It's still something that is a little bit artificial. And even though the technology helps a lot, it will not allow us to precisely follow the regulations in order to maintain license. We need to divert from them. We need to be much more flexible. We need to learn from the current situations how to be flexible in order to maintain. For sure, something that Neil touched as well as me in my presentation with respect to the remote working, maybe something, a path that we will drive towards future, that in the 10 years from now, with use of the data stream and use of the data-based objects, you will be able to control the traffic even in a small volume from your own computer. It may be a future, and I believe it's not a far future from now. But still, we need to adopt a new measures for that, because while we will be able to control, no one will be able to assess the capabilities of the controller sitting at home, because there wouldn't be this aspect of observation, learning from others. Self-assessment will be the only way to actually follow the rules properly. So I'd say that from the perspective of controller competences and the requirements, the situation is completely unprecedented, and we try to match what's available, but on the other hand, we need to learn and make all the training, all the recurrent processes much more flexible and much more responsive to the current situation than we were originally planning to have.
Thank you, Jarek. That was very insightful. Absolutely, I think we all agree that we have got a long way to go in terms of the regulatory challenges. There's safety, security, competency. Things need to be addressed, but the good news is that there are ANSPs which are looking into it on even a smaller scale. They're implementing it, and of course it varies country by country. But once the change has started, it's just a matter of time that it will just catch up to it, and we will get to the point where we are talking what the future is going to look like. So just a change of subject a bit, which connects to the remote aspect of the future of air traffic control. So we are seeing a lot of drone and UTM, which is being managed remotely in different locations. Those do not require the actual physical facilities around the airports. How do you, so Neil, coming to yourself first, and then we'll go around. From Seerage perspective, how are you integrating the UTM or the drones into the infrastructure? And is that also being managed within your own solution provision, or is it something that is going to be dealt with it differently? And how do you see the future of that from remote operations perspective?
All right, thanks, Karam. You actually, you're touching upon the key point. Integration is key here. So in a digital tower environment, all of this data that's available gives us the opportunity to integrate it in one source of truth for operational use. Now, things like UTM integration, drone, or even FOD detection, these, of course, could be done by the digital tower system themselves, but that's a very specialized function. Our vision is really that we integrate with existing systems that are capable of that. So if an airport deploys a FOD detection system or a UTM integration system, it doesn't make sense for us to try to replicate that functionality. Let's integrate the existing functionality. So therefore, we need that data to be easily transferable. I mentioned API earlier as a good method of that. So really, integration is the key. Airports and ANSPs are investing in technology. Let's use the best technology that's out there and integrate it into the system for availability of use. In terms of remote applications, this can be provided remotely, as you suggest. It doesn't really matter where the control center is. It's really just a question of transferring data. We know that can be done safely and securely. It's really a case of people of the industry actually deciding that we want to implement this. Aviation is a little bit slow to adopt new technology sometimes. And look, that's based on historical reasons and also, reasons of safety. People presume that, to be safe, we have to proceed very slowly. I would sometimes like to ask the question, show me why it isn't safe, instead of constantly being challenged to prove why something is safe. You know, so in terms of the remote applications, again, it's just about appetite for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Neil. That was helpful. Just Talal, I want to use maybe a few seconds and want to take ATC's and ANSP view on the UTM and ATM integration. Obviously, this is something which Dan's, I'm sure, is looking from the ATC standpoint. How is the integration being done, or is it going to be kept separate from the ANSP? And what's Dan's view in terms of the UTM integration into the ATM?
It's a big question. Okay, thank you. I'll try to answer this as an ANSP and as a drone hobbyist, actually. As an ANSP, we just had the Dubai drone law just being released, and we are looking into it, and we are looking into how to implement it. It has its challenges. The big question is whether it's a separate entity, or is it the same entity? I mean, will you have specialized guys to operate the UTM, or will you have the same ADCOs operate the ATM? The UTM. That's still a question to be answered, and I don't have the answer for it, to be honest, right now. I wish to believe that UTM and ATM should, for me in my mind, it's inseparable. I mean, you cannot separate those two. It's an ANSP function. Having that said, as a drone hobbyist, I have fun with flying drones. We need to use drone technology, the same as the airline technology. You have the aircraft has many systems. They are much more advanced than ANSPs with their systems. The same thing for drones. When I fly my drone, it will never hit anything. It has sensors all over around, and you know your altitude. You know you have everything built in. Your restricted areas, everything is there. So use that data. Use the data, use everything in the drone, use the drone capabilities. The same as we are saying, use aircraft capabilities, the same thing you need to use the drone capabilities. That's it from my side.
Well, thank you. I think, you know, I've been reading a lot of Q&A, and people are obviously quite excited to ask questions around the drone and UTM and ATM integration, and also the effect on the workforce. So I thought I would get your view, and I think you said it very in a very polite manner that you don't know. You're right, because we don't know what how the workforce is going to be managed. I think from ANSP standpoint, yes, it needs to be managed the same way as the airplanes are being managed, because of the safety constraints, security constraints, etc. You know, so it has to be more, it has to be regularized. And great to hear that Dubai drone law is there. So we are moving in the right direction. But of course, you know, we don't have the answers how the workforce is going to be handled. But certainly soon our audience will hear, and I'm sure that Reed can schedule another webinar on this topic, which people are quite excited about. I would like to, since we have 3 minutes left, and I mean, we can go a little over. I'm receiving lots of questions from our attendees, so I just want to focus on few questions which are quite common across the board. I want to come to Neil, just as a quick one. I think somebody was asking about if you can speak about some of the challenges in terms of implementing the remote tower technology at Budapest or Changi, and how long did it actually took you guys to implement that?
Okay, so the Budapest program took about 2 years, I think, to get to live certified status. The challenge is twofold. first of all, the technology is one challenge, but just as equal a challenge, if not more, is the change management of ATCOs, to adopt and adapt to the new technology, or preferably have the technology adapt to them. So change in ATM has traditionally been a difficult process because you're effectively, it's almost like a Formula One car, but you can't have a pit stop. You're trying to change the wheels whilst the car is still proceeding around the track. So that's kind of the way I see this challenge when you're trying to change something. It's not as though you can close an airport, just to introduce some new procedures. You need to keep providing the service. So at both Budapest and Changi, the technology is not the most difficult part. It's a very important part, of course, and we spend a lot of time getting that right. But once the technology is accepted, you can then start to use it in a live environment. And that's when the really interesting part comes, because the people using the system get to provide feedback and get to decide how they want to use the functionality. So I think any ANSP that's embarking upon this process needs to pay just as much attention to the human change management process as the technological implementation.
Thank you, Neil. That was very helpful. Yarick, an attendee has asked an interesting question and it's directed to yourself. There are many similar questions along the same lines, so I want to come to you. How much has the cybersecurity posed a challenge to adoption of remote towers concept?
I believe that for all concepts that are involving sending any information on the long distance, the cybersecurity threats are the most important part that are being addressed now. Starting from, of course, security at the network level, finishing off the equipment itself, as well as the things that are commonly less known for posing the cybersecurity threats, like the power lines or simple things like obstruction of the view or something like this. Yes, we are facing this problem, and it involves a lot of effort to really place all the required measures. For obvious reasons, I will not dig into the deep details of that very much, but we need to face those challenges and address them very well in order to make sure that the system is as much fail-proof as we only can. We will never eliminate the security threats. It's just the matter how we understand the cybersecurity threats, how much we can double check all the connections, all the required parameters, all the required requirements in order to make them more resistant to any potential threats than we really think. I would say that one of the most important things that I see currently is that in all the research projects, and majority of them which we are running are fully focused on sending any particular information, the cybersecurity threats must be addressed in a very comprehensive and complete way. So this became a bigger problem. The bandwidth is not a problem, the quality is not a problem, but cybersecurity threat is a problem, and this is something that will grow along with the time to the very big thing that we'll need to address in every single project, regardless of the type of the project and its true influence on the ATS.
Thank you, Eric. I hope that answered the question that was asked. That was quite detailed, by the way. Thank you. Talal, just so last closing few questions. I mean, of course, the questions keep coming, but we want to, in view of time, we just want to summarize it. I just want to come to Talal, to yourself, and then I'll just go around. Very important theme of question being asked from multiple attendees here, that will the remote working or remote workforce, especially in the ATC environment, affect the ATC workforce? Will it grow? Will people lose jobs? How will that actually, how do you see that from ATC and ANSP perspective?
Okay. Okay, this is This is always the common question. We've been talking about this just earlier. Whenever you talk about AI, and now it's coming to this. Whenever you talk about AI, people think that they will lose their job. As a matter of fact, no, it shouldn't, in my mind. You will optimize the number. If I can put it in this concept, you will optimize the workforce. Meaning, you need in dance, you need 200 controllers. Currently, you have 100. The other 100, instead of recruiting 100, you will have them working by hours or working remotely, which does not mean that we will fire people. It still require workforce. But when you are talking about AI, that's something else, and we will not go into that subject now.
Yeah, no, I think it's very important. I mean, people, of course, want to ask the question from future perspective. And before going to Neil and Jarek on this one,
one more thing. Sorry, one more thing. We have to always remember that long time ago, ICAO changed. We are always thinking ATC, ATC, ATC. It's not ATC anymore. It's not air traffic controller. It's air traffic management. You manage the traffic more than controlling the traffic. You have systems. You have integration between the systems. You, as an air traffic manager, will become an air traffic manager, will need to. You will be required to do the least amount of work, meaning that to manage the traffic, not to physically control the traffic, turn left, turn right. Those days ended. You need to think now about managing the traffic only.
No, thank you, Talal. I think it's very important that, because the audience is interested to hear from the subject matter experts like yourself and the leaders. How do you see the vision? And I just want to contribute to my views on that, as you rightly said, that the workforce may even increase, actually, because as we are introducing more concepts and technologies, only the skill set needs to be evolved, and same people, be it ATC workforce or others, will be required in those roles with having the same background. So actually the workforce is going to grow eventually, but the skill set may be a bit different. And hence, I think, coming to the idea of constantly evolving the skills and learning new things. And I'm sure that DANs and other ANSPs constantly work to upskill their workforce to meet the future needs. Neil, what's your view from the technology perspective? I mean, I remember when this remote concept and the camera concept came up a long time ago. There were lots of negativity around this, but as we see the implementation, actually we see that additional people or workforce are required to manage the technology infrastructure and lots of software, hardware elements that go along with it. So what's your view on the workforce and how it may impact the ATC/ATM aviation workforce?
Okay, yeah, first of all, I agree with Talal in that I think recruitment and retention is a major problem for ANSPs. So a lot of these concepts aren't aimed at reducing jobs. They're aimed at actually providing a service with the amount of controllers that are available. Turnover of staff it can be an issue, but if we imagine a future remote ATC working concept, some of the issues that create retention problems may not exist anymore. Now, as to the second part of your question, could you repeat just the second part of that for me again, Karam?
I think that the second part was, from introduction of remote tower technology or remote concept, people, think about that there's a lot of negativity when this concept was actually introduced in the beginning. But obviously, I want to hear what's your view. Has the remote or the workforce actually increased based on the technology or the solutions that you're providing to the other NASPs, or it has negatively affected? I just want your view from the technology provider.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So in a large digital tower, this technology isn't aimed at reducing number of control positions necessarily. you know, in the first instance, controllers need to see out the window. So we provide them out the window views. And some of the feedback we get is actually, through the introduction of distributed views of hard to see parts of the airfield, you can actually bring views of some blind spots and hard to see areas into the digital tower. So you can actually increase the amount of things that controllers can see. It's presented in a slightly different way, for sure, and that's part of the change management. So from an initial negative thought of well, I don't want to leave a control tower to move to a digital facility, very quickly we start to get some very positive feedback about what can be seen by it. The second part is that, if I think of somewhere like Singapore, the trials that have been going on there are still using the same control positions. So they've got 3 positions in their smart tower, and those can be configured as any of the tower positions. So you're able to actually run live exercises where you can set up these 3 positions to be whichever 3 you choose out of the overall set. Now, that's not aimed at reducing personnel, but what that is aimed at is operating a more efficient service with the same people that you've got. So can we draw out some extra capacity? Is there some latent capacity in the system, that now, because I've got a better view of a distant threshold, can I start to reduce the spacing on final approach to squeeze extra aircraft in, knowing that I have the granularity and the certainty of what I'm seeing? So almost you could flip it back and say, digital tower can enable additional capacity from your airport with the same number of people. That's another way of gaining efficiency.
Thank you, Neil. Yarick, coming to yourself, and then after that, I'll hand it over back to Daniel because we're out of time. Yarick, a few questions which are aimed at yourself. So if you could please provide your perspective, the first question on the workforce aspect and remote working, how do you see it would affect the global workforce? And also something, if you can touch upon quickly, the artificial intelligence aspect of how do you see AI being introduced and working in the remote environment and how it could make things better for us in the future? I would appreciate that. So 2-part question. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those questions. So first of all, I'd say that the biggest part that comes is about awareness. As you see, the mission of our company, safety is in the air. It's our mission and duty. It means that we need to make a good awareness about everything that comes around safety to both insides of our workforce as well as the outside world. So to create a positive understanding on what safety means and how it's gonna be implemented. Artificial intelligence is amongst things that we are currently progressing on pretty much, checking in how much we can at this stage implement the artificial intelligence into systems, how much it can support, and if the controllers and until which extent shall be aware that artificial intelligence is helping them in the day-to-day work. That means that this kind of awareness, this kind of approach that differs from country to country actually is shaping, let me go to the second question, is shaping how we approach the remote working. Because with the growing trust in the electronic means of communication, with the growing trust in a communication that is not in the segregated, old-fashioned, I'd say, systems, we really gather people to make them much more available for global working, less dependent on a place, and obviously considering all the different regulations, much more flexible to be used in the different positions. I fully agree with what Talal said. There wouldn't be, or I don't know at least, any IT system that actually reduced number of people. It just switched them from one place to another. But basically, the artificial intelligence will make the world a little bit more effective with the same resources and less posed to the threats that are coming from the man error. This is something that we are touching much more, in all the projects, all the problems that are digging deeper into the artificial intelligence or machine learning techniques as well. So I'd say that considering the global workforce and the availability of communication means, even this webinar today, we'll actually face a better understanding and the more inclusive approach to those systems in the long run, rather than more segregated, less global way of working that we did so far. But of course, it must be well supported with both good awareness and a good regulatory basis in the whole world.
Thank you, Jarek. Appreciate your views on that. Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have definitely passed.
May I add?
Please.
I want to add
Yes.
last bit. It's nothing related to aviation. That day I was scrolling through some videos, and I saw very interesting videos about the media. So the media is same as any other work, yeah, same as aviation, same as anything else. As a matter of fact, what will happen with the media is that I heard them saying that the future will be like if you are going to a football match. Companies will request from individuals to take shots of the football match, and then they will deposit money in their account. So meaning that the workforce is increasing. They are getting a better use of people who are attending the match. Instead of sending all their cameras to the match, the people will be the cameras. I just want to give some assurance to the people that
No, I think that's very, very thoughtful.
more job will be created.
I appreciate that. Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, look, we're out of time, and I don't want to go over time. I've been receiving messages from the organizers. So just few things, and then I'll make a closing statement and hand it over to Daniel. I appreciate all the questions which were asked in the Q&A. And if there are any questions which are unanswered, we will be sharing those with the speakers, and those will be answered to the group of attendees. So be assured from my and Reed perspective. Just a closing one, I think, just to summarize today's conversation, I think what the conclusion is, obviously there are regulatory challenges that need to be addressed from remote working and the future of remote ATC. And obviously there are countries which are working within their own remit to explore innovation and to lead this, how the future of remote working of ATC is going to look like. And of course, some countries are behind because there may not be set guidelines from ICAO in certain areas. And I think as we progress, we all kind of agree, combination of technology and the data and also the ANSP workforce, they're all aligned in terms of the thought and the future, that the future is definitely looking bright for remote air traffic control operations. And yes, certainly there are challenges that need to be addressed by different stakeholders where people need to sit onto the table. And as we progress in the future, things will get resolved and eventually we will get there. And I think all our speakers, SMEs, reassured that yes, the talent pool of the workforce may change and evolve, but that does not mean the reduction of workforce. Actually, it may mean the increase of workforce, but associated with the same concept that we are evolving. And so I would like to thank everyone for their participation. Please do not forget to take the survey. I want to remind you that. And thank you, our guest speakers, for your attendance. Over to you, Daniel. Thank you.
And thank you to all the attendees who could join us today. Very special thank you to Talal, Neil, Jarek for your valuable insights. As Khurram pointed out, we're hoping that we're going to see recovery. In the last webinar we did earlier this month, we were talking about April and May figures minus 95% year on year. Today we're talking about minus 50%. There is a long way to go, of course, but hopefully we'll get there. A short survey will be sent out. Please do share your feedback. It'll help us create more content for you that's useful. If you need to avail our matchmaking facility and meet our speakers, again, let us know in the seminar, in the questionnaire, and we'll help you with that. The next ATC webinar takes place 2 weeks from now, Tuesday, 11th August. We'll continue discussing our discussion on remote towers with Saab, Micronav, and Think Research. We'll send you all an invite for that. Please do join us. On behalf of Reed Exhibitions and our speakers, once again, thank you all very much. Stay safe, everyone, and goodbye.